reviewing a client's progress, Rory?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I was eternally grateful for as a student was the 6-week reviews, which we carried out roughly halfway through an engagement with a client. So I had a placement which did 12 sessions, and the 6-week review was the catching up with the client and really asking how things were going. Is anything that's changed? Is anything that they want to look at in the next 6 weeks? It doesn't have to be very formal, but it's a useful conversation piece. And there's a few things that can happen with a 6-week review. Client may take that as an opportunity to say, look, thank you very much. I think I've got all I need from this, and move on, which they may not want to do because they don't want to offend you. I've had clients who said, I didn't want to offend you, so I just turned up even though I had nothing to say. So it gives the power back to the client. And also, it's incredibly useful when we come to supervision, because when we do the review, we can have a look and discuss in supervision what the client said, what has worked for them, what work is yet to be done. And also, it's a check and balance. So your supervisor can see exactly where you are in the relationship, as opposed to just going through the whole arc of 12 weeks. And I think the other thing is to remind ourselves that 6 weeks reviews are not cast in stone. If you say to a client 2 weeks before the 6-week review, perhaps you'll have a 6-week review, and that would be in your contract. But if you came in and said, oh, I've had a terrible week, you put the review onto one side and just carry on working with the client. You don't dictate to them and say, I'm sorry I've had a bad week, but I had to do my 6-week review, and that's the end of it. So they're very useful, and also they're very good learning points. You can take it into your group discussion at a university or college, and you can take it into your supervisor and gain some valuable insights. And I hope that a 6-week review is still a thing, to be honest, Ken.
I guess it depends where you work. You might not be offering 12 sessions. There might not be 6 weeks. If you've got 6 sessions, it might be a 3-week review. You're wanting to aim to pop that in around about halfway through the arc of counselling. And I think the important thing that stood out for me, Rory, is when this is first discussed. It's first discussed when you're contracting.
Yes.
You explain the arc in the same way as we introduce the ending of counselling in our contracting. We might, specifically if we're working within a certain amount of sessions, we might say we have 6 sessions that we'll be working together, and around session 5 we'll be closing that down for you. But what we will do is around about halfway through is we'll do a quick review and check where you're at and how it's all going for you. This is in the contracting session, so that it's not a surprise when that comes up. And as you said, Rory, it's not a formal process that has to sit in a certain place at a certain time. It's going to be dependent on the client, where they find themselves, how they find themselves. Now, why do we have reviews? If you've ever been out for dinner and ordered some food, when that food arrived, chances are somebody might have walked past your table and said, how's the food? Yeah. And that's a review. That's a review of your meal, and it's a common thing, and the restaurant learns from that. Even though the chef in the kitchen is following the same recipe as they always follow, they're asking you, and they're just checking in, how is it for you? And it's the same when we're counselling. We're offering a service. It's the client's frame of reference that we're tuning into. So not asking them or checking in with them and how it's going for them, we're missing the point. It gives us direction. It shows us what works for this client, maybe what doesn't work for this client, and it gives us something to take to our supervisor, specifically if there's a challenge somewhere for the client. Also, reviews are really important for preparing for future journeys. So let's say we have got 6 sessions with this client. That's all we've got because we're working in an agency. And at session number 3, we check in with this client. It's the right time. They're quite happy to discuss how it's going for them in therapy. And they say to us something like, you know what? I've realized digging into this material that it goes a lot deeper than I initially thought. I think I've got a lot of childhood stuff that I'm going to need to work through now. As the counsellor, we can go, you know what, we've got 3 sessions left here. And we're not saying this out loud. We're doing this in our internal supervisor and go, this client's going to need more. Can I ask for more with my agency? Is there a referral pathway? So in the same way as it may be that the client doesn't need more, it might be that we recognize that there is a referral opportunity, or that we need to see if we can extend therapy. So it really is, it's in service of the client, and the review is going to be different with every client. And it's also how we learn as counsellors what's working and what's not working for that specific individual. What works for one doesn't work for another. If somebody likes a rare steak, somebody else prefers it well done.
Indeed.
That's the way it is.
Absolutely, Ken. And the other thing is the 6-week review isn't just for students. It's something you can carry on in your practice when you're qualified. So certainly when I was practicing, I would do a 6-week review or regular reviews, see where the client was, to get a sense of if there was any other support needed, if there was a referral needed, if my level of competence matched the presentation of the client. Because if a client came in and said, I'm hearing voices and I'm getting headaches and I'm seeing things, then maybe I wasn't the best person to see that person. Maybe that's a referral to the doctor with a consultation with the client. You wouldn't go behind the back, but you'd say, have you ever thought of maybe speaking to your doctor about this and see what they have to say? So it's something that really carries on into your practice. I know I used to do regular reviews when I was in practice, and it's amazing just how well they work, Ken.
Yeah. And of course, you may go out and go into private practice where there's no limit to the sessions, where it can be as long as it needs to be. And then you may have a number of reviews. You might review again and continuously review. So we do that, first of all, and very importantly, so that it doesn't go the way that Rory mentioned, where that client has got what they need out of therapy, but they just don't know how to end it, and they don't want to let us down, and they probably in their mind go, if I didn't need to go to therapy anymore, then my counsellor would tell me that. So those reviews really important. Now, here's the tricky bit. And this is the $1 million question that I know is on the minds of the students that are listening to this. How do we do a review? Give us an example, Rory, of how we introduce the review, how we start that conversation with our client, and where we might lead with that. Are we asking them questions? How's it done?
It's an interesting one, Ken. It depends on the agency. So an agency may ask you to do Core 10, which is a assessment document, or Core 30. I think there's one that's a bit more in depth, so that you can measure a client's progress. It's not unusual for agencies to use measurement tools. Core is quite a popular one. And so what you might do is you probably do a Core at the beginning. You'd hand this document over and it'd have a number of questions, and they'd tick where they felt they were. And then if you're trained to use Core, you could look at it and you can say, by your response to this, it seems to me that you're feeling a lack of energy. And it's a very clever assessment tool. So you'd say to the client, in 6 weeks, we're going to do another one just to see how things have improved. And we do it for two reasons. Really, Core should be in the service of the client, so we know if the client's getting any better, if the therapy is being impactful. But usually it's done as a measurement tool for funding. A lot of agencies ask you to do Core or PHQ-9, which is another analytic tool, because they have to evidence that the therapy is effective and the money they're paying to employ a therapist or to run the service is being well spent. It's about value for money. For those who don't do that, I think it's just about saying to the client, when you came, you were really anxious about job interviews, and I wonder where you are now. And it might be they say, actually, I feel a bit better. Or they might say, I'm still a bit anxious. And you say, okay, what would be useful? And they might say, could we go through some scenarios? Could I talk about what would happen if I said this and they said that? And you say, of course you can. You're there to work creatively with the client. So you could do it in two ways. But the key thing is mention it at contracting.
Yep. Beautifully said. Thank you, Rory. I see the client review slightly different. So we're speaking about the tools that you were speaking about, Rory, Core, and the other assessment tools of where a client may be. Certainly, I dipped into some personal therapy for myself when something came up in my life. And the working was, it was really, a tool was used at the end of each and every session.
Oh.
And that worked pretty well because it tracked the session through. However, there was a separate review sat in the middle as well, outside of the tools. Because if we look at the tools, they're exactly as you said, Rory. They track certain metrics that we're measuring within a client, their well-being levels, of sleeping well, things like that, their health and well-being. They're asking very specific things. What they don't ask within those tools is the working relationship and what works and what doesn't work and the nuance of that. So even if you are using those tools, I still advise that you do a check-in with that client. And you might put in something along the lines of, is there anything that you found particularly helpful in our work together? And that is a open question because it's unlikely they're going to go yes or no. They're going to give you some information which gives you an indication of what works for them. That opens up a door for us to go in and say, is that something you'd like to work more with? And you open the door for the client to be guiding the therapeutic process in what actually works for them. And then similarly, you can say, is there anything that we've covered here that is not helpful for you? So we're asking for that feedback. Invite the client into being part of their therapy. So the review session really can be a tailoring process of what works, what is maybe not as effective, and at the same time gathering information that is useful for us to take to supervision, useful for the agency. And my first supervisor said, when I went into placement, your clients will teach you, Kenneth, your clients will teach you. And this is a great way for our clients to teach you. When we open that door, when we put down the welcome mat and say, help me understand you and help you. It's a beautiful process, Rory.
Well said, Ken. And as a student, you can take that feedback into your supervisor and discuss it in supervision. Because remember, your supervision is the mortar between the bricks. When you go to university or college, you're building your knowledge like you would build a wall. But supervision is the mortar in between that holds all the bricks together. You're developing your practice, which is exactly what we should be doing from the moment we start practicing. We should never stop developing our practice.
Oh, yes. So, to close out this topic, reviewing clients' progress, here's an exercise that you can take and use in your simulated skills session. So if you're not yet in placement, you're not yet doing these reviews, you can simulate them. You can practice them with your peers. First, you would find a peer that you can say, you know, what I'd like to do is in our skills session today, in our 40-minute skills session, where we've got 20 minutes aside as speaker and listener and we swap over, what I'd like to do is after 10 minutes, I'd like to do a little mini review and ask you how that's going for you, and then you feedback, and then I'll do the rest of the session and you can do the same for me. So you can practice these. You don't have to wait. You can do that little mini review so that when you are using that in service of your clients, it's not the first time that your lips are uttering those words.
Developing that kind of very nuanced skill of listening to what the client wants, making sure that the relationship produces exactly what the client wants. So we can't always guarantee it, but we're aiming to do that. We're aiming to be the best fit for our clients. And I think the 6-week review or reviews in general are a good way of facilitating that.